This is not a fabricated story. One rainy afternoon in Portland, I pulled up in front of the daycare to pick up my daughter when my phone buzzed. A message from my husband. I'm gone. Carla and I are in Paris. I took all the company's money, $1 million. I'm sorry. Take care of the kids. At that moment, I couldn't breathe. 9 years of marriage, dissolved into 6 cold words. Inside, my daughter was waiting, her hands still stained with paint, smiling innocently as if nothing had changed. That day, everything collapsed. But from that very moment, I began the journey to reclaim my life. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and this is my true story. If you've ever fallen apart, ever had to start again from nothing, stay with me, because sometimes the cruelest betrayal is the beginning of a new kind of strength. The afternoon rain was thick and heavy, drops drumming against the windshield like a frantic heartbeat. I had just finished a call with a client and was packing up my files when my phone buzzed on the desk. A new message. The sender's name clear, David. I was still smiling, thinking he was reminding me to buy bread or milk for the kids. But when my thumb slid across the screen, the smile died. I'm gone. Carla and I are in Paris. I took all the company's money, $1 million. I'm sorry. Take care of the kids. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. The words stood still on the screen, cold and lifeless as stone. I felt nothing. No anger, no tears, just a hollow silence, as if the world's sound had been sucked away. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under the yellow rain-lit lamps. Colleagues passed by, heels tapping on the wooden floor, keyboards clacking. Life continued with cruel normalcy. I looked around and realized everyone else's world kept moving while mine had stopped in one single message. David, the man I had trusted completely, the man I had built a company with for over 10 years, had vanished. He took everything. Our company's money, our assets, and the last remnants of my faith. I sat there for a long time, phone in hand, staring blankly through the fogged window. Fragments of memories flickered. Our company's opening day, the first big contract, the dinner where he said we were celebrating our future, the future I thought we shared. Now all that remained was the rain. I stood up, packed my things mechanically. No one noticed what had just happened. I slipped my phone into my pocket, took my coat, and walked out into the storm. No umbrella. The cold rain hit my face, washed away my makeup, blurred the world. But at least it reminded me I was still alive. On the drive home, the headlights smeared across the wet streets. I don't remember how I drove, only the question spinning in my head. Why did he do it? Why no word? Why leave like a thief? When I got home, Ben and Lucy were already at the table, faces bright. Mom, is Dad coming home for dinner? Lucy asked, her little voice pure and hopeful. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. Daddy's busy at work, sweetheart. We'll eat first. They didn't notice. They kept laughing, talking. I watched them, my chest tightening. Everything I had left. Those 2 small souls. The only reason I didn't collapse right there. That night, after they slept, I sat by the window. Streetlights shimmered through the raindrops on the glass, like tears that refused to fall. I opened my phone. The message was still there. Short, emotionless, ending a marriage, a company, a trust. I didn't delete it. I needed to remember, so I would never forget how this felt. That night, I learned something. No storm ever stops just because we beg it to, and no rain can hide pain forever. Tomorrow I'd still have to wake up, make coffee, go to work, pretend I was okay. But deep down, I knew. From that message on, the old Eleanor Mitchell had died, and someone else would have to be born in the rain. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. No music, the kind David used to play every evening. No trace of his cologne. Everything was still there. His coat behind the door, his muddy shoes by the porch, except the man himself, who had taken all the warmth with him. Ben and Lucy were asleep, curled toward each other, Lucy's hair draped across her brother's shoulder, peaceful, unaware. I sat by their bed, torn between love and fear. Love because they were too young to understand. Fear because one day I'd have to tell them the truth, that their father left not just for another woman, but with the future of our family. In the living room, I sat on the dark brown sofa David had picked, classic, solid. Our wedding photo still stood on the shelf, he in a suit, me in white, both smiling by the sea. I picked it up and looked closely at my younger face. Bright eyes, a hopeful smile. I remembered how he whispered then, "We'll build a whole life from nothing." And we did, until the day he took even that nothing away and left me with something worse than bankruptcy, emptiness. I opened my laptop and logged into the company account. The numbers stared back at me, empty. $1 million gone. A single transfer at 2:37 p.m. to an international account. The recipient, David Mitchell. His digital signature still there. Neat, confident, just as when he signed contracts. I closed the laptop. No tears. I had gone beyond crying. What remained was a hollow exhaustion. The half-finished pasta from dinner was still on the table. Ben had said, "Mom, it's better than usual tonight." I laughed. The cruel irony. My best meal was the first without David. Around 9, the phone rang. The caller ID, Margaret, David's mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Eleanor?" Her voice was cold, clipped. "What did you do to make David leave? He said he couldn't stand the pressure anymore." I clenched the phone, struggling to stay calm. "Mrs. Mitchell, David didn't leave because of pressure. He took the company's money and ran away with Carla de Paris." Silence. Then a soft laugh. Dismissive. "You always have a way of blaming others, don't you? He's a man. Of course, he'll seek happiness when there's no respect at home." The words cut like knives. I didn't answer. I just hung up. The room fell silent again. I wandered through the house like a ghost. Everything seemed stripped of meaning. His chair, his coffee cup, the wristwatch he forgot on the shelf, all relics of a man who no longer existed. I poured myself a glass of wine. The red liquid trembled with my shaking hand. The taste was bitter, burning. Maybe it was the first time I drank alone, not to celebrate, but to fill the void. Near midnight, I opened my phone again. The message glowed on the dark screen. Clean, indifferent. I read it once more. Maybe he thought I would break, beg him to return, crumble under the ruin. But what he didn't know was this. When a woman loses everything, she also loses fear. I set the phone down and looked out the window. Rain kept falling, steady and relentless. Someone once said, "After every rain, the earth softens to begin a new season." I didn't know if I had the strength to reach that new season, but I knew one thing. Tonight, I was still alive. I still had 2 children who needed their mother, and there was still a faint spark inside me that refused to die. Maybe that small spark was enough to help me rise again, not for David, but for Ben, for Lucy, and for the woman in the wedding photo, who once believed in something good and still deserves to live. The next morning, the city was veiled in mist. I made coffee, poured it into David's mug, and set it on the table, a habit not yet broken. Outside, cars hummed under the leftover drizzle. A new day, yet I felt trapped in the same nightmare. The phone rang nonstop, unknown numbers, texts from coworkers, friends, reporters. The news was out. Mitchell Real Estate CEO flees with secretary, taking $1 million. That headline was everywhere. Social media, the morning news, my inbox. I stared at the words, "flees with secretary," feeling the sting of humiliation. Everyone knew her name, Carla, but they all knew I was the wife he betrayed. None of them knew I was sitting here in an empty kitchen, trying to breathe like a normal human being. A loud knock on the door. Mr. Harris, head of finance. Eleanor, we need your signature. The bank has frozen the company's accounts. I froze. All of them? He nodded. Yes. Since you're David's wife, they suspect you might be complicit. The police will come soon for questioning. The room spun. I wanted to protest, to scream, but no sound came out. I wasn't his accomplice. I was his victim. But to them, I was Mrs. Mitchell, co-founder, joint signatory, potential partner in crime. Every title I once wore with pride had become a chain. By noon, I went to the office. People's eyes followed me like needles. Some whispered, some turned away. David's desk was empty, files sealed with police tape. On the wall hung the company's poster. Mitchell Real Estate, building dreams together. What dreams were left when the builder had burned them all? There was an envelope on my desk. Inside a note. Eleanor, you should leave. The press is circling. The police will investigate. Staying will only hurt you more. No signature. My fingers trembled. Leave? I had worked here 15 years. I knew every client, every blueprint, every wall. This company wasn't just a job. It was a part of my life. The place where David and I once believed we were creating something that mattered. And now they wanted me to abandon it, like a house on fire. I sat down, looking around. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, scattering across a thin layer of dust. A strange feeling filled me. Pain, anger, and clarity. If David could destroy everything with a text, I could rebuild something with my own hands. But before rebuilding, I had to survive the day. That afternoon, the police came. They asked question after question about accounts, contracts, Carla. I answered each one, dry-voiced. Did you know Mr. Mitchell transferred money from the company to his personal account on March 12th? No. Have you contacted him since he left? No. Do you know where he is now? I know as much as you do. Paris. When they left, the house fell silent again. I looked around at the remnants of our old life. His jacket, his folders, the coffee cup drying on the desk. Everything still waiting for him to come back. But I knew he wouldn't. That night, Ben asked, Mom, is Dad mad at you? Why do you ask? Someone at school said they saw Dad on TV. Did he do something bad? I pulled him close, my voice breaking. It's not your fault, sweetheart, and it's not mine. Sometimes grown-ups make wrong choices, and we just have to keep walking. When the kids were asleep, I stood on the balcony. The wind was cold, carrying the smell of rain and the hum of traffic. I opened my laptop. David's face filled the news. Once familiar, now the image of a fugitive. The comments below cut deep. They must have done it together. She definitely knew. A woman like that deserves it. I shut the laptop. My chest ached. The feeling of the world turning against you is unbearable. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, I realized something. I was still standing, still breathing, still a mother to 2 children who needed me strong. This was only the beginning of my downfall, but perhaps also the beginning of something else. Something I couldn't name yet, but I could feel it. A quiet, burning ember deep inside. 3 days later, I woke at 4 a.m., the sky outside still black. People say insomnia is a symptom of grief, but to me it felt like survival. Staying awake to avoid the nightmare waiting behind my eyes. I made coffee, opened my laptop, stared at the empty company homepage. Mitchell Real Estate, a hollow name, sealed by the government and branded a scandal. I dug through old emails, contracts, payroll sheets, all the things David used to keep hidden. And then I found it. A folder titled Paris Project. Inside were months of emails between David and Carla, not about business. They were filled with coded bank details, statements, and plans for an offshore account. In one message, David wrote, "Don't worry. Once everything's done, she won't be able to access a thing. I've made her sign enough papers to take the blame. She. That was me. My hands went cold. David hadn't just run away with Carla. He'd planned to frame me, to make me the legal culprit for the stolen funds. He hadn't only betrayed love, he'd betrayed my name, my life. I almost called the police, but stopped. No, I needed stronger evidence, a plan. Silence. If I'd learned anything from 15 years beside David, it was this. Whoever controls the data controls the truth. I kept searching. Another file, Horizon account. It listed small, regular transfers, a subtle, consistent over 6 months, from marketing funds into a shadow account. He'd been stealing piece by piece, brick by brick, dismantling our foundation. Did he ever feel guilty? Did he ever look at me cooking dinner, helping our kids with homework, and think, she doesn't deserve this? Or had he already plotted his escape while kissing me goodbye each morning? A quiet rage rose inside. Not loud, but sharp and cold. This wasn't just a broken marriage. It was a calculated betrayal, and I wasn't going to let it end with me buried under his ruins. I called Laura Jennings, an old friend, and our former company lawyer. When she picked up, my throat tightened. Laura, I need help. I think David's trying to pin the entire financial fraud on me. Do you have proof? Yes. Emails, accounts, transactions. Good. Don't delete anything. Don't speak to anyone. Why not? Because if he could steal $1 million, he could pay someone to erase the evidence. I looked around the house. Empty, hollow. For the first time since David left, I wasn't afraid. I was clear. I had to protect my kids, my name, and maybe, somehow, what was left of the company. That night, after Ben and Lucy slept, I sat in the dark. The wind rattled the windows, rain falling again. I opened my phone and reread his message. I'm gone. Those words had once destroyed me. Now they were just a marker. The beginning. I opened my notebook and wrote, meet Laura, discuss evidence, check system access, keep company alive this week. A drop blurred the ink, rain or tears, I didn't know. But I didn't wipe it away. I wanted to remember this night, the night I stopped being afraid. The storm outside roared, but inside me, a new one was forming. Quiet, fierce, unstoppable. Laura arrived the next morning, her leather briefcase worn, her eyes kind but sharp. You look worse than I imagined, she said half jokingly. I never thought I'd become a financial criminal because of my husband, I replied, managing a smile. We sat at the kitchen table, piles of files and printouts between our coffees. Laura read in silence, flipping through the pages as if reading someone's confession. Finally, she looked up. Eleanor, I'll be honest. Everything David did looks legal on paper. He planned this carefully. Transferred from authorized accounts, kept clean records, left traces that make you look like the approving party. So you're saying I can't prove my innocence? No, she said calmly. I'm saying you have to be smarter than him. You must prove he intended to defraud, and for that we need to find what he didn't want anyone to see. I stared at her. The man I once trusted to protect us had turned his knowledge into a weapon. Are you ready to fight? Laura asked. I nodded. I have nothing left to lose. Wrong, she said softly. You have 2 children. That means you can't afford to lose. That afternoon, I returned to the office for the first time since everything happened. The company sign still hung, half the word Mitchell torn away. Inside, the place was cold, dusty, and nearly empty. When I entered, people stopped. Some looked wary. Some greeted me quietly. Mrs. Mitchell, someone asked, is it true the company's shutting down? I looked around at the faces, the same ones that once trusted us. No, I said. Not while I'm still here. They stared, half doubtful, half hopeful. I knew I had no power left, except belief. But sometimes belief is all it takes to start again. I began from 0. calling old clients, begging them not to withdraw contracts. Some hung up, some scolded me, but some listened, because they remembered I spoke to them with sincerity, not empty pitches. I contacted the bank, filed appeals against the freeze. Laura helped assemble documents proving I hadn't authorized the transfers. It was slow, exhausting, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was doing something to survive. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, a small whiteboard propped up with a rough plan to revive the company. On it, I wrote 4 lines. Keep loyal staff. Rebrand the company, find new investors, protect the family name. I stared at the last line, protect the family name, and let out a bitter laugh. What family? David was somewhere in Paris with a younger woman. All I had left were 2 kids and a mountain of debt. Yet even so, I wanted to keep the name Mitchell, not for him, but because I once believed it stood for something. The next morning, I called Laura. I want to change the company's name. All right, she said. Do you have one in mind? I looked out at the window, where the first sunlight after days of rain cut across the curtains. Harborstone, I said. Something steady and calm, like the place I want to begin again. Laura was quiet for a moment. That's the name of someone who's done running. In the first week, I wrote to every employee who remained, 17 out of more than 40. This company isn't Mitchell Real Estate anymore. It's Harborstone. We may not have money, but we can rebuild our reputation up if we do this right. Some replied. Some returned. There would be no pay for 3 months, but they agreed to work. Because they trusted me. In the days that followed, I arrived at 6 a.m. and left at midnight. I signed every form myself, checked every email, called every client. Beside me, Laura handled the legal battles. It was grueling. And strangely, I felt alive. Sometimes we only learn who we are after everything is taken away. And I, Eleanor Mitchell, or rather, Eleanor of Harborstone, finally began to see my path through the ashes. The first days of Harborstone Realty passed in a determined silence. No flashy meetings, no champagne, no confident speeches, only cold mornings, the hiss of the coffee machine in the old office, and a handful of people who still believed this company was worth saving. Laura and I turned the old conference room into a temporary headquarters. The tired wallboards were replaced with sticky notes and client maps. On them, I wrote a single line in black ink. It isn't money, but trust that keeps us alive. Every morning, I made coffee for everyone, a small gesture, but it warmed the room. Bill, our oldest broker, would joke, "Never seen a boss pour coffee before she pours money." I'd just smile. I don't have the money yet, but I do have coffee. We started with small contracts, an old house in the suburbs, a vacant lot. I went in person to meet each owner and convince them Harborstone wasn't the old company. Many were doubtful, many refused, but some looked me in the eye and said, "If you've got the guts to come back after that, I can trust you." I still remember the first deal we closed after the scandal, a small wooden house on the Willamette. When the client signed, my hands shook and tears threatened. Not because of the fee, but because for the first time in months, I felt I still had worth. At night, when I came home, I still had to be a mother. Cook dinner, help with homework, listen to school stories. Ben asked, "Mom, do you think Dad's having fun working in Paris?" I paused, looked at him, and answered softly, "He might be having fun, but I don't think real happiness is there, sweetheart." Ben nodded, maybe not understanding fully, but there was a new steadiness in his eyes. Lucy was different. She'd climb onto a chair, hand me a colored pencil. "Draw the new company, Mom. I want to see it." I laughed and drew a little house with a high roof and a small sign, Harborstone. Lucy added a sun and a rainbow. "Make sure the windows are open so the light can come in," she said. I looked at the drawing, and my heart eased. Maybe that was the image I needed to keep in my mind whenever despair came. A small lit house standing firm in a storm. 3 months later, Harborstone began to draw attention. A local paper ran a piece. The betrayed woman who saved a company from the ashes. I read it quietly. Not proud, not ashamed. Just a strange sense of peace. Because for the first time, they mentioned me not as the fugitive's wife, but as someone who stood after the fall. But success always arrives with its own tests. One afternoon, I received an anonymous email. Don't think you can erase the past. We know you signed transfers for David. I read it over and over, then forwarded it to Laura. She replied with a single line. They're afraid of you. Keep going. Don't step back. Her message cleared my head more than anything. I understood I was on the right path. And the closer I got to the truth, the more some people would want me to fall. One weekend, I went back to Mitchell Real Estate's old headquarters, the place that had been sealed. The building was empty, walls blotched, the sign snapped in half. I walked through each room, where David used to sit, where I once believed the two of us were a team. I didn't feel pain anymore, only the gentle emptiness of someone who has stopped clinging. Before I left, I took down the rusted, faded Mitchell plaque that still dangled by the door. I brought it home, not to reminisce, but to remind myself. No ruin is meaningless if you dare to build on the same ground. When spring came, Harborstone Realty officially signed a new residential development on Portland's east side, worth more than $2 million. On signing day, I shook the partner's hand in the morning sun. He said, I used to think women couldn't handle the pressure in this industry. You proved me wrong. I smiled. I used to think I couldn't handle it either. Turns out endurance is what women do best. As I left the room, Laura called. You just put a period on the Mitchell scandal. Now write your own story. I looked up at the sky, the clouds parting to reveal a clear slice of blue. I knew this wasn't an ending, just the opening of a new chapter. The chapter of rebirth, of a woman who no longer feared loss. Success didn't arrive with noise. It came with early mornings at the desk as the sun rose, with long nights reviewing contracts under a pale yellow lamp. Harborstone Realty was turning a profit. I hired more staff, opened a small office in the Pearl District, where old buildings mingled with artist cafes. Things felt calmer, but I knew this. Trust, in others and in yourself, is the most fragile thing in the world. One morning, while I was prepping a presentation for a new housing project, Laura called. Eleanor, we need to talk. There's a new rumor. I sighed. What is it this time? They're saying you're just pretending to be a victim, that you knew everything David did and you're cashing in by playing hurt. I went quiet. Rumors, the oldest, most effective weapon. I'd heard so much whispering that I'd grown slow to react. But this time, they reached my clients. Some canceled meetings. Some stopped replying to emails. The trust I'd built with blood and tears wavered at a few baseless words. That evening, I sat alone in the office, watching the drizzle through the window. On my desk lay an open file. In the corner, a photo of me and the kids on Harborstone's opening day. Ben holding a bouquet, Lucy beaming, and me, a stiff smile but bright eyes. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe what mattered wasn't whether others believed in me, but that I never stopped believing in myself. The next day, I did what I'd never dared, appeared in public. I agreed to an interview on local television. The host, a sharp-eyed middle-aged woman, opened with, "Did you ever know your husband was siphoning company funds?" I looked straight into the camera. No, I only knew I trusted the wrong person. "Do you hate him?" I smiled, so slightly the audience might have missed it. If hate could bring the money back, I might hate. But hate doesn't restore honor, and it doesn't feed two children. I choose work over resentment. The host paused, then nodded. The interview aired, and something unexpected happened. Hundreds of messages poured in, most of them encouragement. Many women shared that they'd lived something similar. Betrayal, loss, suspicion. But my story made them believe they could start again. One evening I received a handwritten letter. You don't know me, but because of you, I left an abusive husband. I want to start over too, like you. Thank you for not staying silent. I folded the letter, tears spotting the edge, not out of pride, but because I realized my pain was not meaningless. But not everyone forgives. At a city council meeting for a new project, one of David's former partners approached. Eleanor, he said, cool and flat, you're impressive. I still don't know whether you were a victim or the architect. I met his eyes and answered evenly. Maybe you should ask your conscience that question. I have nothing left to hide. I walked away, my chest trembling, not from fear, but from freedom. When you have nothing left to prove, you become steadier than ever. That month, Harborstone posted its highest revenue since founding. I treated the team to a weekend at the coast. That night by the fire, Bill, the one who stayed from the start, Pice, leaned over and said quietly, You know, people can say whatever they like, but I watched you clear desks, wash coffee cups, and pay back wages one by one. Someone like that, I trust. I said nothing. Over the surf, I could hear my heartbeat. Steady now, no longer shaking like in the early days. When I got home, Ben and Lucy were decorating the living room. On the wall, they hung a messy, hand-drawn sign. Harborstone, where Mom's the boss. I laughed, eyes stinging. Mom, are you done being sad? Ben asked. I knelt and pulled them close. No one stops being sad completely, sweetheart. But I've learned not to let sadness steer me. That night, after they slept, I sat on the porch watching the moon on the roofline. I touched my chest, where the scar of those months of betrayal still lay. No longer painful, but never gone. I smiled. Scars aren't ugly. They're proof I survived. That morning was a rare, clear sky after weeks of rain. Sunlight poured into Harborstone's office, lighting the wall where our team photo hung, taken the day we signed our biggest contract yet. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. An international prefix flashed. Paula's 33, France. I froze. For a moment, the air hardened around me. My heart tightened, the reflex of an old wound. I answered. A voice on the other end, rough and urgent. Eleanor, it's me, David. I said nothing, and my heartbeat thudded like a drum in an empty room. I know I have no right to call, but I need to talk. What's left to say, David? I was wrong. Carla left me. She took what was left of the money. I'm stuck in Paris with nothing. I just wanted to apologize. I closed my eyes. Images flooded back. The old text, the empty accounts, the kids' eyes, the sleepless, anxious nights. They returned, but without the weight they once had. An apology? I asked, my voice strangely calm. Are you sorry for betraying me, or for being betrayed? Silence. Eleanor, I've lost everything. My name, my money, my work. I just want to come back, to talk, to see the kids. I swear I've realized... I cut him off. No, David, you realize nothing out of conscience, only because there's nothing left. Don't you remember your message to me? I'm gone. Good luck with the rent. I laughed, dry. And you think I've been waiting for you? I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I truly love you, Eleanor. I was silent. Once those words might have broken me. Now they only seemed absurd. Love that arrives with deceit and destruction isn't love. It's power wearing the mask of feeling. I spoke slowly, each word measured. Do you know what I lost, David? Not just money, not just reputation. I lost my faith in people, in marriage, in myself, and I found it again. Not thanks to you, but despite you. Eleanor, I only want to see Ben and Lucy. Please, don't keep me from them. I'm not keeping you, I said, but I won't let them be hurt again. If you truly want to see them, have your lawyer contact mine. If you just want to ease your conscience, try confession, not my phone. I paused, drew a breath. Good luck, David, with The rent in Paris, and I hung up. I sat for a moment, looking at the cup of coffee gone cold. No tears, no trembling, only a strange lightness, as if the last storm inside me had finally dissolved. Laura came in, saw the phone in my hand. "Something up?" I smiled faintly. "A ghost called from the past." She arched a brow. "You okay?" "Better than ever." I told her about the call. When I finished, she said, "You just beat him for the last time. No court, no exhibits. You won by not needing him." I looked out the window. Afternoon sun spread across the new buildings. Projects Harborstone was raising. Each brick felt like proof of my life. Steady, incremental, rebuilt from ash. That evening at home, Ben and Lucy were doing homework. Ben looked up. "Mom, did Dad send us anything?" I hesitated a second, then said, "Yes, sweetheart." He said, "He misses you both." Lucy whispered, "Do you miss him, Mom?" I sat, gathered them into my arms. "I do. But missing someone doesn't mean wanting to go back. Missing is just knowing we once loved and once lived." They nodded and returned to their pages. I watched them and saw the future clearly, a future that didn't need David. That night I stood on the porch. Rain began again, steady on the tin roof, beating like a slow heart. I opened my phone and looked at the old message. "I'm gone. Good luck with the rent." I smiled and deleted it. For the first time since that day, on the blank screen, no words remained, only my reflection, a woman who no longer trembled at her ex-husband's name, who no longer feared living alone. The rain kept falling, but I felt at peace. Maybe because I finally understood. Peace isn't when the storm ends, but when you learn to stand in the storm without shaking. The next day, an email arrived from the bank. Subject: Notice of international account. Freeze related to David Mitchell. I read it and nodded. The past had closed its own door, without my hand on the knob. I shut the laptop and opened the window. Outside, dawn was rising, bright gold, warm and clear. A new chapter was opening. No David, no fear. Only Eleanor, and a straight road ahead. A month after the call from Paris, I received a letter from Interpol. David Mitchell had been arrested at Charles de Gaulle Airport while trying to withdraw money from an illicit account opened under someone else's name. Among the assets frozen was the sum tied to the capital siphoned from Mitchell Real Estate, now part of an international investigation. I read the letter 3 times in silence. No triumph, no joy, just a quiet feeling. At last, the circle had closed. Laura called right after. "Good news," she said, unable to hide the satisfaction in her voice. "France will extradite him to the U.S. on financial fraud charges. You may be called as a witness." I simply answered, "If justice needs me, I'll be there." On the morning of the first hearing, Portland was raining again. The federal courthouse sat in the city center. Gray stone walls, steps slick and cold. I walked slowly, the echo of my heels steady in the open space, even and firm like my heartbeat. Inside, the courtroom was bright and chilly. David stood there in a dark suit, his jaw clean-shaven, but his face drawn and hollow. We looked at each other. No words, no greeting. That gaze no longer made me tremble. It only felt distant, as if I were looking at someone I once knew, but never truly understood. When the judge called me to testify, I stepped to the stand. My voice carried, even and steady. I told everything, from the first text, to the sleepless nights, to how I uncovered forged documents and hidden transfers. His attorney tried to counter. "Mrs. Mitchell, did you not also sign some transfer papers implying your consent?" I gave a small, cool smile. "Yes, I signed, as a wife signs out of trust. If trust is a crime, then I plead guilty." The room fell quiet. The judge looked at me, eyes gentle. When I stepped down, Laura touched my shoulder and whispered, "You just made the whole room believe you." But justice didn't stop with David. A few days later, police widened the investigation to his mother, Mrs. Margaret Mitchell, for aiding concealment and transfers. I heard the news at the office. Bill lowered his newspaper and looked at me. "You don't have to say a thing. You reap what you sow." I only nodded. I didn't feel vindicated, only tired. Those people had once been my family. That afternoon, I picked up Ben and Lucy from school. They were playing in the rain, laughing bright and clear. Lucy handed me a drawing. 2 grown-ups holding 2 children's hands beneath a sky with a rainbow. "I drew you and us," she said. "I added the rainbow, so you remember every rain ends." I bent down and hugged her. "You're right, Lucy. Every rain does end." When the trial concluded, David was sentenced to 7 years for financial fraud and falsifying documents. The press covered it relentlessly, calling it the Mitchell collapse, from the summit to the abyss. A reporter asked me outside the courthouse, "Do you feel avenged, seeing your ex-husband go to prison?" I looked straight into the lens. "No, I only feel sorrow. People can choose love or betrayal. He chose betrayal. I choose to keep living." They fell silent. A photo of me standing in the rain, holding an umbrella, eyes calm, ran on a local paper's front page with the headline, "Eleanor Mitchell, the woman who rose from the ashes." I didn't keep the paper, but Laura did. She said, "Any day you doubt yourself, read it. Not for pride, to remember you survived." The following month, I was invited to speak at a seminar on leadership and resilience. I stood before hundreds, most of them middle-aged women, people who had lost, been betrayed, begun again. I spoke about Harbor Stone Realty, about making coffee for the team, about mornings mopping floors alone and combing through contracts, about 2 children who taught their mother how to smile again. At the end, I said, betrayal isn't only losing faith in others, it's also an opportunity to find faith in yourself. I once thought my life ended with a single text. Now I know endings are sometimes destiny, clearing the stage for a beginning. The room rose in applause. I bowed, my eyes stinging. Not from emotion, but from a genuine lightness. For the first time in years. That night, when I came home, Ben and Lucy were already asleep. On the table sat Lucy's old drawing, now framed. I sank onto the sofa, poured a glass of red, and let the lamplight fall across the frame. I whispered, "Thank you, David, for leaving. If you hadn't betrayed me, I might never have known how strong I am." Outside, Portland was still raining, that dense cold rain I once despised. But that night, I left the window open. The drops pattered softly on the wooden frame, even and gentle, like the background music of another life. And I knew. The price of betrayal isn't always prison. Sometimes it's living long enough to watch the person you tried to break still standing and shining. A year after the trial, spring came to Portland. The city looked washed clean after long rains. Bluer skies, clearer air, cherry blossoms blooming along Burnside. I was sitting in Harbor Stone Realty's new office, a glass-bright building with a silver logo etched on the front doors. In the sunlight, the words, Harbor Stone, where new homes begin, reflected on the opposite wall. I looked around, new staff smiling, tidy desks, phones ringing, no longer the empty room of the early days. I realized I had finally completed the circle. From loss to rebirth, from despair to quiet. Late morning, Laura arrived with 2 hot coffees. "For the new boss of the year," she said, setting a cup down. "I hear Harbor Stone was just chosen as the primary distributor for the Riverside project?" I nodded. "Yes, over $20 million. Laura whistled. "You did it, Ellie. From an old room and a few self-poured coffees, you rebuilt an empire." I laughed. "Not an empire, just a house. This time, built on truth." Laura studied me for a long moment, then said softly, "I think you didn't just save the company, you saved yourself." That afternoon, I took Ben and Lucy to the riverfront park. The air was warm, scented with new grass. Ben kicked a soccer ball. Lucy chased butterflies. I sat on a wooden bench watching sunlight spill across the water. An older man took the seat beside me with a kind smile. "I remember you," he said. "You were in the paper last year, weren't you? The woman with the real estate company." I smiled lightly. "Yes, that was probably me." He nodded, his gaze gentle. "I lost my wife to cancer 10 years ago. When I read your story, I thought, maybe every pain can turn to strength if we don't let it swallow us." I was quiet, looking out at the river, the breeze lifting my hair. "Thank you," I said. "I once thought I'd never stand again." "Turns out you don't have to stand right away. You just have to stop lying down in the hurt." He smiled and rose. "You're right, Ms. Mitchell. Keep living well." When he was gone, I watched my children, their laughter ringing through the park. That was the sound of freedom. That night, I opened the old wooden box, the one holding letters, papers, and a few relics of my former marriage. The divorce decree, canceled bank cards, and a photo. Me, David, and the children in front of our first house in the suburbs. I studied it for a long time. The memories came, but without a sting. I slipped the photo into a new frame and wrote a small line on the back. Not to remember, but to remind myself I once believed. And believing is never wrong. I simply placed my trust in the wrong person. I set the frame on the shelf among new pictures. Ben and Lucy at kindergarten graduation, Laura and me on the day we opened the new office. The past was no longer a wound. It was only the opening chapter of a long book. A week later, I was invited to a fundraising gala for women entrepreneurs. I sat at a round table under warm lights. A young businesswoman took the stage, her voice trembling but resolute. "I started my company because of a speech by a woman named Eleanor Mitchell. Tonight, I want to thank her, not just for her words, but for showing us that failure isn't a period." Applause filled the room. I sat still, eyes stinging. When she stepped down, she came to me and squeezed my hand. "If you ever need reminding of what you've made happen, think of me." I smiled and answered softly, "Thank you. You're proof that pain is never useless." Late that night, I went home. On the porch, the streetlight glinted on the glass door. A mist of rain fell, soft as breath. I sat on the wooden chair and poured a small glass of wine. My phone lit up, a message from an unknown number. "Congratulations, Eleanor. I heard Harborstone is thriving. DM." I looked at the words and smiled. No anger, no bitterness. I typed just one line. "Thank you, David. I hope you find your own peace as well." I set the phone down and watched the rain. True peace, perhaps, is when you can say the name of the person who hurt you and your heart doesn't ache. The next morning, the sky was clear, sunlight pouring through the windows. I took Ben and Lucy to school, then stopped by the little cafe at the corner, the one I used to visit when I was unemployed. The barista recognized me and smiled. "Black coffee, light on sugar, right?" I nodded. "You've got a good memory." He replied, "People don't forget someone who kept smiling in a storm." I sat by the window and breathed in the coffee and the morning air. Light washed across the city, warm and clean. I opened a new notebook and wrote the first lines. "Life owes us nothing. But if we're patient enough, it will return us to ourselves." I closed the notebook and smiled. No more tears. No past pressing down. Only Eleanor Mitchell, a mother, a leader, a free person. And as I left the cafe, I lifted my face to the sky, a clear blue stretching out like a promise for the days to come. When a storm carries everything away, it doesn't mean the story is over. It means a new chapter is waiting to be written. Eleanor Mitchell's journey isn't only about betrayal or justice, but about finding strength, love, and the quiet courage to begin again when the world swears you can't. If this story moved you, share it, or simply keep it in your heart as a reminder that inner strength lives in each of us, because somewhere out there, someone is still standing in the rain, waiting for their own dawn. Follow along as we keep walking through stories of courage, hope, and new beginnings.